They talk about abortion at the convention like it's a day, it's like it's Christmas. And, like, hey, I always, like the old liberals, I always was like, let's make abortion safe, legal, and rare, right? And they're like, no, let's cheer it on like it's Christmas. I'm like, that's weird. It's like cheering on amputation. Like, yay, you get to get your amputation. I'm like, no, that's something that's, if you have to have it, I'm glad it's available, but that's always a sad day. Anyway, so that's where.
What is that about? I really noticed that because I've been covering this stuff since 92. And Clinton, I mean, I've always been against abortion. I'm just going to say that. Agree or disagree with me, but I feel that way. But I remember Clinton really kind of going out of his way to be like, this, it's a sad thing. But we think in these circumstances, it should be legal. And I'm so struck by the change. What is that?
Well, I had a conversation at the convention with someone who's, she's in this women's rights organization. She was the head of it, and I don't want to mention her name, but I was saying, well, I've always been pro-choice. I don't want a G-man in between doctor and a patient.
Yeah.
I trust women. I trust doctors to make that decision without a government stepping. Yeah. And she's like, well, that's not good enough. You have to be pro-abortion. And I'm like, that just seems. I'm like, well, what's your message to someone like me who's pro-choice but not pro-abortion? And she's like, well, that's a longer conversation. I'm like, you don't have a message for me?
Are you? She said you have to be pro-abortion?
Pro-abortion. I mean, it blew me away. And this is someone I like and respect, and it's very funny and all that stuff. But I didn't see it coming because I've been saying, because during COVID, they went from being pro-choice to pro-abortion, which I noticed. Right? I know, because it sounds so weird coming off your lips. I'm pro-abortion. You're supposed to be pro-choice. You're supposed to be bodily autonomy, which they don't say anymore because they were all for the mandated emergency medical treatment, which was COVID vaccines with no long-term studies. They were for making people take that. And so that's the exact opposite of bodily autonomy, something that I've said my entire life. Everybody who called themselves a liberal has said, well, they stopped saying that because they're not for bodily autonomy. They're for the government being able to mandate an experimental medical treatment while they're lying to you about it. But they're pro-abortion. And I would say on my show that nobody's pro-abortion. And then I met someone at the convention who was. And I was just like, whoa. It still kind of blows me away.
Do you have any idea what that is? It blows me away too. Again, and I'm coming at it from exactly the opposite perspective. Like, I've always disagreed with the pro-choice position. But I also thought when I would listen to Clinton, I'd be like, I get it. I get why people feel, 13-year-old girl raped. She's got a disabled, the baby's disabled. I mean, I understand why people are like, yeah, she should have an abortion or have the right to. This is such a different message, and I just don't know where that came from or why. That it's just really striking to me.
It's dark.
Super dark.
I think it's super dark, yeah. But those are the same people who can turn their head at the genocide happening in Palestine and say things. I mean, I would turn to people who liberal their whole life, and I'm like, so you stand with the people of Palestine, right? And they're like, Kamala's not the president of the Middle East. They'll say things like that. And I'm like, what? But she is funding it. And it's like, well, Trump is going to be worse. What is he going to do? Dig up the dead babies and kill them again? If Trump is worse, then we deal with Trump when that happens. But right now, you cannot reward what the Democratic administration is doing, what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. You cannot reward them with your vote. You have to make them pay a price. You have to influence them. And that's why now every Muslim mayor in Michigan came out and I'm pretty sure just endorsed Donald Trump.
Yeah. And
so you're gonna wag your finger at those people. I've seen people priority. They go, well, Trump's going to go house to house. I work with immigrants, and Trump's going to go house to house and kick them out. And I'm like, so you're prioritizing the immigration status of migrants over the literal slaughter of Palestinian children. That's morally repugnant. And as Thomas Frank said in Listen Liberal, that when you listen to these people moralize, it's stomach churning, and that is stomach. It's like you're just bending yourself in a press. There's no red line. I have a red line. My red line is genocide. And, Kamala Harris could come get my vote. If she said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to fund Israel anymore. That's their problem. Or something. She won't do it. And so if you're willing to go along with that, there's no doubt you're not voting for a lesser evil. You're just voting for straight up evil, and you're doing mental gymnastics to make yourself feel better about it. People have to lie to themselves about Donald Trump, the same establishment that venerated him my entire life. He was on every magazine cover, invited on every late night talk show. He hosted Saturday Night Live. Hollywood gave him his own national television show for 10 years. They gave him Emmy nominations, right? And Oprah loved him. The View kissed him on the lips. They loved him. Everybody loves Donald Trump. Stephen Colbert loved him. He would say, look, everybody loves Donald Trump. Thanks for running, Stephen Colbert said to him. And then all of a sudden, once he became president, he's like, he's Hitler. He's the worst thing in the world. And if you look at what he was saying about...
What caused that pivot?
The establishment. So the establishment they couldn't control him. He's, like I've heard you say, they're afraid he's going to do one less war than they want. Yeah. And so they couldn't control him. And he's also, as Aaron Mate has pointed out, that he puts an ugly face on imperialism, right? Because now they've painted this guy as a white supremacist, and he speaks in a crude way often, and he puts an ugly face on imperialism. So it makes it harder for them to invade small brown countries and steal their natural resources. A lot easier if it's Barack Obama doing it. Look at what he did to Libya, like what they did to Syria, like what they did to Afghanistan for 20 years, Yemen, the whole deal. So it makes it so, but Trump makes it harder for them, right? And plus, he's a wild card. He wouldn't go along. That's why they lied about him. That's why the CIA lied in aid of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris about Hunter's laptop. That's why they did Russiagate, which was concocted by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and that's why the FBI lied to the FISA court 17 times so they could get a phone tap on Donald Trump's phone and his entire organization. And they still couldn't find a crime that they wanted to impeach him over, because they had to find a crime that they weren't also complicit in. That's why it took so long. So
fair point.
And for me saying, and when I had Cornel West on my show, I tried to impress upon him that, don't you see, like, you don't have to like Donald Trump, right? I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but what you see they're doing to Donald Trump, they would do to anybody. And when I say they, I mean the establishment and the handful of billionaires that actually run the Western world and our media. They would, and own the Congress. They would do to anybody who stood up. Look what they did to Bernie Sanders, right? So when there was a chance that Bernie Sanders was going to become the nominee, they immediately Russiagated him. They immediately called him a sexist. They immediately called his followers racist and sexist and violent. They did the exact same thing. And that's what I tried to impress upon Kwame. They would do this to you. They would do this to Bernie Sanders. They would do it to me. They would do it to Jill. They do it to Jill Stein. They'll do it to anybody who they can't control. And Cornel West's response to me was to call me a Trumper.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.